In this video, we're going to be taking an informative look at attachment and trauma, and the importance of relationships and healing, especially in relation to dissociative identity disorder. Hi, I'm Bodhi from the Kairos System, and you're watching the Kairos Collaborative. We're a dissociative identity disorder system, aiming to share our experiences in our own unique ways. I like to take an educational approach to sharing my side of our journey through healing, so you can expect a lot of informative style content from me. For the first video on our channel, I wanted to talk about something that's pretty simple when you get down to it, but at least for our system, when we found out about it, it held a lot of significance. We're going to be looking at some developmental psych basics of attachment, the trauma model therapy, the theory of structural dissociation of the personality, and accelerated experimental dynamic psychotherapy, and of course, how it all relates. Promise I wasn't joking when I said this was a basic concept. So let's start by developing a baseline definition of what attachment is. Attachment is the emotional bond within a relationship. In developmental psychology, we're mostly talking about the relationship between the child and the primary caregiver. Children learn, through the model of their relationships with their caregivers, how to form further relationships down the line. There are certain patterns to child-parent attachment, and these patterns are cross-cultural, presenting similarly in various societies, attesting to the biological consistency of the importance of relationships. Bowlby's attachment theory was created based on these reoccurring patterns seen across various cultures. He examined these styles of attachment based on specific set and recurrent behaviors, especially in relation to the proximity towards the caregiver when presented with some sort of threat. Bowlby proposed that attachment can be understood evolutionarily as a fulfillment of the needs of safety and security. Having these needs fulfilled obviously advances the child's chances of survival. Bowlby's correlation between humans and this psychological need for attachment wasn't the first to further this idea. About a decade prior, Harlow's monkey experiments examined this need that mammals have for psychological safety to be as significant as other physical needs that they present. So, evolutionarily, we have this need to bond with our caregivers. And not having this need fulfilled creates feelings of unsafety and insecurity. This obviously influences the relationship that we're going to have with that primary caregiver, but further on, it's going to influence any relationships that we try and develop with people in our lives. And furthermore, it'll develop our relationship with ourselves, parts of ourselves, not necessarily in relation to dissociative identity disorder, but the relationship that we have between our own psyche, so to speak. Mary Ainsworth furthered the study of attachment through her Strange Situations experiment. Here she looked more closely at these patterns of attachment by examining how different children reacted when the reintroduction of their primary caregiver occurred, and aimed to more closely examine these styles of attachment and the recurrent behaviors associated with them. What Ainsworth noted were three varying patterns of how children responded, which she attributed to different styles of attachment: secure, anxious, and ambivalent or avoidant. When a lack of attunement with one's primary caregiver leads to this avoidant attachment, the child is forced to dissociate from their own needs and from that relationship with the parent. That's why this style of attachment has been especially linked and associated to dissociative symptoms. Dr. Peter Barrick, a former student of Ainsworth and frontrunner for dissociative identity disorder research, has linked attachment to DID. Barrick actually suggested DID was a form of an attachment disorder. Barrick pointed out that us with DID tend to have extreme detachment or emotional unresponsiveness, experienced by children faced with an absent or neglectful caregiver, as described by Bowlby. He said that children of unresponsible caregivers were more likely to result in dissociative or disengaged behaviors. In his book and subsequent treatment approach, Trauma Model Therapy, Dr. Colin Ross examines how trauma relates to the development of disorganized attachment. These children must bond, connect, and attach to their caregivers, and at other times, flee and avoid terrifying and abusive caretakers. In this case, a disorganized attachment is formed for a chaotic, unpredictable, and inescapable pattern. In a whole, trauma model therapy focuses on two things: primary caregiver loss and a locus of control shift. Essentially, how detachment from forming that relationship can impact a child's psyche, and how the control can influence how the child develops. I personally believe that the locus of control shift is something that's especially important because it can be seen in a lot of trauma survivors. I know it really helped us to learn about it because it explained a lot of the shame theory behind trauma and why we internalize and blame ourselves for the abuse that occurs to us. That need for a shift in an internalized locus of control might also influence the development of DID. That's not to say that there's causation present that everyone who experiences this will develop DID, but rather more to explain why DID is a survival mechanism. Taking a couple steps back to Peter Barrick's work in attachment, Barrick found that both people with disorganized attachment and DID have various attachment scripts. People with DID tend to have these various scripts in between alters. This may be coupled with a need to dissociate from memories of abuse, especially if the primary caregiver is causing the pain, and the need to dissociate the abuse or neglect of those needs is what leads to the development of dissociative amnesia. The abuse and dissociation process begins compartmentalization, where memories and various experiences are pushed between ego states. This is not the same as repression, it's pushing between conscious states. So now you have these various dissociated parts of self with varying attachment styles and memories, which throughout time, as they experience life, will of course develop their own senses of relating to the world. So attachment plays a large role in the development of DID. A disorganized early attachment style generates vulnerability to dissociation of the personality, which, when combined with persistent childhood neglect and trauma, leads to development of this disorder. Because the caregiver is at the same time the source of protection and the source of fear, attachment needs are conjoined with fear and dissociative responses, with fear and defensive responses. According to the theory of structural dissociation of the personality, this is the kind of biological paradox that can only be addressed by maintaining divisions within personality subsystems, which may or may not present as DID through tertiary dissociation. Again, you can have this dissociation in personality subsystems without having DID and without having altered parts. It makes sense that those of us who haven't been able to find the attachment we need in our outside relationships, and a need that brings so much protection and safety, that we would then start to look inside ourselves for that. So why does this matter? Why did it make such a difference to us in our healing journey to have this knowledge? Because attachment styles can change. Through trauma processing and through healing, one can also heal the attachment scripts that they've developed throughout their life. And for us, systems, that change of attachment scripts can be developed towards certain alters. It may be perpetrating an unhealthy lifestyle for the system overall. It isn't easy, and it takes a lot of healing, but the simple fact that it's possible is relieving for us personally. And more than that, what's really important in all of this is the significance that relationships have in healing from trauma. Studying attachment theory led us right to learning about AEDP, or Accelerated Experimental Dynamic Psychotherapy. This is a type of therapy that examines exactly how relationships relate to healing. In fact, AEDP states that the only way to properly heal is through relationships with others. Again, that would make sense why we would create others in our mind to have that sense of healing. The basic influence is to make a more tangible relationship between the therapist and their client. And that all relates to the importance that relationships have with our process of healing. I'm so happy that you made it to the end of the video and that you found it interesting enough to watch all the way through. If you like this kind of content, we're going to be putting more out, so maybe subscribe or, drop a comment. Let me know. Yeah, it was super cool. I had fun.